Build new developments on what already exists was the advice from several urban planning experts at the conference, attended by about 200 architects, developers, and others. The new urbanism has drawn the interest of Mayor Norquist.
The purpose of the meeting today is not for us to find out that all the answers lie in some particular city somewhere else, but a lot of times you can learn a lot about your own area, your own community, by seeing things that happen in other communities, and to give you an idea of how to do something here. Not necessarily the same thing, but maybe a variation on a theme, or to do something that is completely different, but you react to what you see somewhere else and learn from it. As you go through the presentations today, think about what adds value, what makes the city more valuable, what makes the city a place where people want to live, where people want to work, where they want to invest. And you look around, those of you that are from out of town, if you get a chance to look around Milwaukee, look not only at the downtown, which has a lot of variety and things in it to look for, but look at some of the neighborhood streets in Milwaukee. Mitchell Street, Brady Street, which is going through a renaissance right now. Villard Avenue. There's a number of neighborhood streets, and there's people from the Department of City Development that would be more than happy to show you their favorite streets in Milwaukee. But all of them have some virtues that are unique to them, and that's what makes cities unique. Instead of having everything look like the same strip mall that you saw outside of Dallas, Texas, or Phoenix, Arizona, or whatever, Milwaukee is unique, and Milwaukee's neighborhoods are unique. And so building on that uniqueness, that's one of the things that makes it attractive. And the city of Milwaukee and its buildings and the culture and the people and the traditions and all the other things that make up our community that are within those buildings is a powerful attraction, and we can build on that. And we can learn on how to build on it better by knowing more about Minneapolis and St. Louis and Chicago and Charleston and all kinds of other places that go through many of the same issues we are, and are also learning to appreciate themselves more, to realize that they're not obsolete. While there may be parts of things that we are obsolete, like knob wiring, for example, or things like that. You do need computers, you do need to have modern technology, but the urban form is not obsolete. The urban form is good, and our community has a design and a style that we can build on, instead of somehow feeling we have to scrape it off the earth and replace it with a series of surface parking lots and strip malls. And so I'm happy we're having this design conference today. I think it'll help to add to the understanding and appreciation of what needs to happen in Milwaukee. And I hope that you'll take everything here today and think about it for the weeks to come, and come up with ways to make Milwaukee even better. Thank you very much.
The principles of this new urbanism have been around for years in older neighborhoods. Development should be as accessible to those on foot, bike, or bus as it is to cars. A diversity of land uses should be within a quarter mile of each other. The size, character, and setting of new projects should relate to their surroundings. What do these principles mean in practical terms? One reason for all of the excitement over the new Wisconsin Center is that it would provide not only a world-class convention destination, but a building that is uniquely Milwaukee. A somewhat modernistic building, but at the same time, one that is reminiscent of traditional downtown architecture. Another example is the new Osco drugstore at the corner of East Brady and North Farwell. A new setback ordinance required the store to be built along the street, as are many other buildings in the area. City planners and neighbors didn't want to see the same kind of suburban-style shopping center that's located across the street. The new YWCA building on North King Drive would be another example, incorporating details common to other buildings in the historic district. And the East Point Commons complex is another, a dense mix of apartments, shops, and other services on the Lower East Side. While the new urbanism can be practiced in downtowns and city neighborhoods, Minneapolis Planning Director Paul Farmer cautioned against pitting one against the other, saying both must be strong.
I'm going to be presenting a bit of a story in three parts here today. It's not just a neighborhood level design case, because I think in order to understand some of the kinds of things I believe we need to do in neighborhoods, we need to look at the bigger picture, we need to look at the downtown, we need to look at the structure of the city, and we need to look at the relationship then between the downtown and the neighborhoods. And so first, let me point out that I believe very strongly that a strong downtown supports strong neighborhoods and vice versa, and that we need to be very careful in not having a situation develop in our cities where it's a neighborhood versus downtown situation. And I have seen that too often around the country. I think that the neighborhoods and the downtowns need to work together. If anything, if you want to posit that type of opposition, I think it needs to be the neighborhoods with the downtown versus the suburbs. And I think that's the way that we ought to be looking at the way we design and build our cities. A second point I'll make is that cities are gathering places. And I think that that's very, very important. And I think the boards outside in the hallway show that we need to continue to strive to bring people together and design our places so that people will naturally want to come together there. By being a gathering place, a city by its nature is inclusionary. And it's the antithesis of something like the gated community that we see happening particularly in the Southwest in this country, which is extraordinarily exclusionary. I think also we need to talk about procedures, that the cities we want, the neighborhoods we want, don't just happen because somebody hires a good architect. I think that you need to think about the procedures and the way in which you go about implementing projects at the local level. And a professor of mine in graduate school many years ago coined the acronym ACID, and that was just before it became to mean other things in colleges. But in any case, for John Reps, ACID meant advice, controls, incentives, and development. And those are the four handles, you might say, we have to influence the development of our cities: advice, controls, incentives, and development.
During a slide presentation of activities in Pittsburgh, where he was deputy planning director, Farmer urged promotion of strong downtowns and a non-car ethic.
We can make choices in our metropolitan areas. And in the 1970s, Pittsburgh made an important choice. And I think it today is one of the reasons that the Pittsburgh of today exists as opposed to a different kind of Pittsburgh. And that choice was to be very, very aggressive with respect to mass transportation. I think that we need to create a pedestrian ethic, a non-car ethic in our cities, and that's one of the reasons I showed you so much of the downtown. We don't just do it on a neighborhood basis. We don't do it by putting in a project in the neighborhood that doesn't have parking out in the front. It has to be something that you work at as a city and a region. As I explained, Pittsburgh did that starting at least in the 1970s and through the 1980s. Portland has been doing that in the 1980s and into the 1990s. I find in Minneapolis, for example, that's one of our great challenges. Minneapolis has a major kind of car ethic, and it's hard to introduce into that a pedestrian ethic. We've created our cities where it's just too easy to jump in a car to do everything without even thinking. But if you can provide environments that give people an opportunity, I think little by little you find that they will start choosing something other than the private automobile for all of their trips. And keep in mind that the journey to work is a minority of the trips that people take. The majority are all of those other kinds of things. And I think that we can continue to reinforce our neighborhoods and our downtowns in a way that those journeys are taken increasingly in something other than a car. Downtowns are incredibly efficient. In downtown Pittsburgh, we were able to show that locating a job in downtown led to 1/9 the vehicle miles traveled of that same job out in the suburbs, 1/9.
The conference then heard from John Hull, Director of Urban Planning in St. Louis. He said that urban design adds value, pointing to the riverfront arch as a design that has an impact on economic development. Hole said new urban designs must bring people together with their environment.
For me, urban design is about place and people, how people gather in place and how place brings people together. Urban design is a holistic approach that seeks not just to analyze life into its component parts, but instead to develop a special awareness of the interconnections between the parts, their interrelatedness. Each component contributes to the whole, and importantly, people don't view the world in bits. People may appreciate the bits, the historic buildings, the secure neighborhoods, etc., but they relate and they're moved by the whole. And of course, the whole is a great deal more than the sum of its parts. The built environment is vastly more than the sum of its buildings. It is from the whole that we derive much of what we value, our perceptions of the place, the characteristic identity of our neighborhoods or the city, and how each city varies from each other. This extraordinary legacy is not just of buildings, but of the places themselves, the concept of the city. When we say St. Louis, we understand St. Louis as an image. For even where some buildings come and go, the spirit, the character, the identity of the place, more than not, survives. It is changed, but it survives. And it's up to each one of us, each generation, to build upon that place and not to destroy that place.
A planner from the city of Toronto, Joe Berridge, told participants the general public needs more of an understanding of the concepts of urban design.
What's interesting to me is that there is developing a solid body of practice about how to do this, about how to remake cities. And that's a very heartening thing, because what it suggests is essentially almost the institutionalization, the formalization of what has been, urban design has been rather a fringe discipline to now. I think the other important thing is that this is not rocket science. This is, to use a well-worn phrase, contemporary phrase, common sense. It's pretty straightforward, and frankly, the more straightforward we can make it, the more we can demystify it, the better. And I think that what is important to me, especially as someone involved in cities, is to realize that the city is a whole thing, and that you don't just look at parts of it, and that, again, so much of our practice has been focused on areas which essentially are pre-war areas of cities, again to the detriment of the practice, because we've relinquished responsibility over the 50% of the city that's been built since the war.
In his slide presentation, Berridge warned against isolating high-density projects in urban areas, low-density developments in suburban areas, without any sense of how the two relate to each other.
The scary thing is that more than 50% of the population now live in suburbs. They have absolutely no memory, affection, understanding of what a traditional city is. And if you're missing 50% of the audience, then actually the chances for the downtown and the central city are very slim. One of the things that's been going on in Toronto that we've been thinking a lot about right now is that one of the crucial decisions that will affect the future of the city is where will baby boomers decide to retire when they want to get rid of their house, when the kids have all gone. If they decide that they want to retire to recreational communities, to smaller towns and villages, then the future of the central city is not bright. If, on the other hand, they decide, as they do in European cities frequently, that they want to retire to the central city and maybe have a country place, then the future of the central city is actually extremely bright. So it's important that we make sure that the suburbs actually do have some kind of urbanistic quality to them, because otherwise, essentially, we're going to see the continued erosion of the whole idea of the city. We've got to figure out how neighborhoods and cities evolve, and essentially tack yourself onto those evolving processes, and also have a little faith that things are going to work out all right. I think one of the awful things that's happened in the last few decades is that we've actually lost that faith. That's what gated communities are all about, is essentially a complete loss of faith in the city. Time can be the great healer and the great resolver, but basically only if the body is essentially healthy.
And the final speaker at the Urban Design Conference was Joseph Riley, the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina. Many of his remarks were motivational in nature.
My remarks could be subtitled, "Why and How We Must Live, We Must Love Our City." And we must. And we must in America. We must love our cities with extraordinary passion. For this marvelous country that was founded by anti-city people is now the most urban nation in the world. And there are very few American citizens whose quality of their daily life's experiences are not directly shaped by what happens in a city, and of course it is the physical design of a city that shapes so much about it.
Mayor Riley said the downtown of any city is also a neighborhood. He said it was Charleston's biggest challenge, as it is in many cities, but that downtowns must be preserved.
It's the biggest challenge because it's the hardest thing to do. As was said early this morning, the numbers work against you. But you know, we can't give up. It is the public realm. It's the democratic heart of a city. We cannot sentence our people to increased privatization and increased removal from each other. That's why you need the heart of the cities. People come and they celebrate, and the eye contact and the elbow contact and the people watching, and the fact that they own just as much of that sidewalk and that public realm as anybody does. We have to fight to save it in America and at all costs. Now we all know that when you invest in quality in a city, the development will come, but the development doesn't have to be the reason. The economics or the humanities are there, but the first reason is what a city is about. It's about being the fruit, the essence of our civilization. So when we invest in quality, that's reason enough.